Besides former FBI Director Jim Comey, there is pretty much no one more frequently attacked and maligned and feared, disliked by Donald Trump than New York Attorney General Letitia James.
Okay, so let me ask you something. What do Jack Smith and Letitia James have in common? I mean, besides the fact that Trump can't stop talking about them, here's what: they're the two people on this entire planet that keep the former president up at night. And I'm not exaggerating. Legal experts, like actual lawyers who used to work at the Department of Justice, are saying these two names strike more fear into Trump than any political opponent ever could. Can you believe this? Now, before you think this is just another story about Trump's legal drama, hold on, because what's happening right now is way bigger than courtrooms and lawsuits. We're talking about the separation of powers in America. We're talking about whether the Justice Department can be turned into a personal revenge machine. And yeah, we're talking about why Trump is so terrified of these two specific people that he's literally trying to get prosecutors to go after them. This is wild. So here's what happened in the last 48 hours. Emily Bazelon, she's a legal columnist at the New York Times, wrote something that made a lot of people pay attention. She said Jack Smith built what she called airtight cases on election interference and classified documents. Airtight, that's the word she used. But here's the kicker. Trump's re-election in 2024 basically forced the DOJ to drop those charges. Yeah, right. Because apparently when you become president again, all your legal problems just vanish? Come on. And then there's Letitia James, the New York Attorney General who's been chasing Trump's business empire for what, a decade now? She already secured a $350 million civil judgment against him. $350 million. That's not pocket change. That's for inflating property values. You know, saying your building is worth way more than it actually is to get better loans. But here's where it gets really interesting. Trump's administration has been trying to flip the script. They've been putting pressure on prosecutors to actually indict Letitia James. Yeah, the person investigating Trump is now being investigated herself, except nothing's sticking. No criminal charges, no evidence, just a lot of noise and political theater. Legal experts are now saying, and this is according to Politico and MSNBC, that Trump fears Smith's ability to secure convictions and James's persistence in finding financial crimes that hit close to home. Hit close to home, that's the phrase they used. So why does this matter right now? Why should you care about two names in Trump's legal universe when there's so much else going on? Because this isn't just about Trump. This is about whether American institutions can hold. This is about checks and balances. This is about whether the Department of Justice becomes a weapon for whoever's in power or whether it stays independent. And look, I know some of you watching this are thinking, oh, here we go again, another Trump hit piece. But hold on. This isn't about being anti-Trump or pro-Trump. This is about what happens when the most powerful person in the country tries to use that power to destroy the people investigating him. That should concern everyone. Left, right, center, doesn't matter. Because if Trump can pressure prosecutors to go after Letitia James just because she's investigating his businesses, what's stopping the next president from doing the same thing? What's stopping any future leader from saying, hey, I don't like this attorney general in this state, let's find something to charge them with? This is a story that's unfolding right now. And yeah, it's complicated. There are a lot of moving parts. There are legal terms and constitutional questions and all that stuff. But at its core, it's pretty simple. Two people have information that could ruin Trump, and Trump is doing everything he can to stop them. So let's break this down. Let's talk about who Jack Smith really is. Let's talk about what Letitia James actually found. And let's talk about why, according to the people who know the law better than almost anyone, these two names represent Trump's worst nightmare. Stick with me, because this gets even crazier. All right, so let's start with Jack Smith. Who is this guy, and why does Trump lose his mind every time someone mentions his name?
Keep in mind, is new to her position because her predecessor, Eric Siebert, followed a similar path. He resigned after he refused to bow to Trump's pressure campaign to criminally indict Jim Comey.
Jack Smith is or was a special counsel appointed by the Department of Justice. His job? Investigate Trump's role in trying to overturn the 2020 election and his handling of classified documents after leaving office. Now, here's what most people don't understand about special counsels. They're not political appointees. They're not part of the president's team. They're supposed to be independent. They're supposed to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads straight to the Oval Office. And Jack Smith, he's known for being thorough, like obsessively thorough. Before Trump, he prosecuted war crimes at The Hague. He went after corrupt politicians. He doesn't mess around. So when Emily Bazelon said his cases were airtight, she meant it. The evidence he compiled on election interference, massive. We're talking about phone calls, emails, witness testimony from people inside Trump's own circle. The classified documents case, even stronger. There were literally photos of boxes of sensitive national security documents stored at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's private club in Florida. Can you believe this? like nuclear secrets and intelligence reports just sitting there. But here's where it gets complicated. When Trump won re-election in November 2024, everything changed because there's this DOJ policy, not a law, just a policy that says you can't indict a sitting president. So the charges had to be dropped. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. How convenient, right? You run for president, you win, and suddenly all your legal problems disappear. That's basically what happened. But here's the thing Jack Smith made sure to do before stepping down. He filed detailed reports. He preserved all the evidence. He made sure that when Trump's term ends, if there's still time on the statute of limitations, those cases could theoretically be revived. That's why Trump is still scared of him, because Jack Smith didn't just walk away. He left a roadmap. Now let's talk about Letitia James, because her story is, honestly, even more fascinating. Letitia James became Attorney General of New York in 2019, and from day one, she made it clear she was going after Trump. She launched a civil investigation into the Trump Organization, his business empire for financial fraud. And what did she find? She found that Trump and his company had been inflating the value of their properties for years, like saying a building was worth $500 million when it was really worth $200 million. Why? To get better loans, to pay lower taxes, to make deals that wouldn't have been possible if they told the truth. This is fraud, plain and simple. In February 2024, a judge ruled against Trump and ordered him to pay $350 million. That's not a fine, that's disgorgement, meaning give back the money you shouldn't have gotten in the first place. Trump appealed, obviously, but the ruling stands, and Letitia James, she's still investigating, because the civil case is just one piece. There are potential criminal charges still on the table. So here's what Trump did. He tried to turn the tables.
An FBI agent was relieved of duty for declining to arrange a perp walk of the Bureau's former director, Jim Comey, in front of news media cameras after Comey was federally charged last month. That's according to 4 people briefed on the matter.
According to reports from ABC News and CNN, the Trump administration started pressuring federal prosecutors to investigate Letitia James. The claim? Mortgage fraud. They said she lied on a mortgage application years ago. Are you kidding me? Like the Attorney General of New York, who has an entire team of lawyers and accountants, is going to commit obvious mortgage fraud that anyone could find. Come on. And guess what happened? Nothing, because there was no evidence. Multiple U.S. attorneys looked into it and found nothing. Some of them even got fired for refusing to pursue bogus charges. This is what weaponizing the Justice Department looks like. This is what happens when someone in power tries to use law enforcement as a personal hit squad. And here's why this matters so much. Because if Trump can pressure prosecutors to go after Letitia James just for doing her job, what does that mean for every other attorney general, every other prosecutor, every other investigator in America? It means no one is safe. It means if you investigate the wrong person, they can come after you. Legal experts, and I'm talking about former DOJ officials, law professors, people who've spent their entire careers in the justice system, are sounding the alarm. They're saying this is a direct threat to the rule of law. Politico ran a piece where they surveyed multiple legal analysts, and the consensus was clear. Trump fears Smith because Smith has the evidence to convict him. Trump fears James because James has the financial records that show exactly how he built his empire, and it's not pretty. One expert put it this way: Smith can send him to prison, James can bankrupt him. Those are the 2 outcomes Trump will do anything to avoid. And then there's the bigger picture here, because this isn't happening in a vacuum. Trump is currently serving his 2nd term. He can't run again in 2028. But what he can do is shape the Justice Department, shape the courts, shape the entire legal landscape, so that when he leaves office, whenever that is, there's no one left to prosecute him. That's the fear. That's what keeps legal experts up at night. Because if Smith's cases get buried, if James's investigations get shut down, if every prosecutor who goes after Trump ends up getting investigated themselves, who's going to hold anyone accountable? MSNBC did a whole segment on this. They brought in former prosecutors who said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that what we're seeing is unprecedented. We've never had a president who came back to power with this many pending legal issues and then used that power to make them all go away. Never. So yeah, Trump fears Jack Smith and Letitia James. But it's not just because of what they've already done. It's because of what they could still do. It's because they have evidence. They have records. They have witness testimony. And unlike political opponents who can be voted out or sidelined, legal cases don't just disappear unless you make them disappear. And that's exactly what Trump is trying to do. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because despite all the pressure, despite all the attempts to shut them down, both Smith and James are still standing. Smith's reports are still public record. James's judgment is still enforceable. The machine hasn't completely crushed them yet. And that, according to everyone I've read, everyone I've listened to, that's what terrifies Trump more than anything else. Okay, so let's break this down into the core points, because there's a lot of noise around this story, and I want to make sure the main takeaways are crystal clear. Point 1. Jack Smith built cases that could have sent Trump to prison. This isn't speculation. This is what legal experts, including Emily Bazelon at the New York Times, are saying. The election interference case had evidence of Trump pressuring state officials to overturn results.
On this new prosecutor resisting bringing charges against Letitia James. Also joining us, former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the Department of Justice, Mary McCord. And with me at the table, retired FBI agent.
The classified documents case had literal photographs of boxes of sensitive materials. These weren't weak cases. These were, as Bazelon said, airtight. But Trump's re-election triggered that DOJ policy about not indicting sitting presidents, so the cases got dropped. Not because they were weak, not because the evidence wasn't there, but because of timing. And yeah, that should make everyone uncomfortable because it means the law applies differently depending on who you are and what office you hold. Point 2. Letitia James exposed decades of financial fraud in the Trump organization. The $350 million judgment, that's real. A judge looked at the evidence, bank records, tax documents, property valuations, and said, yeah, this is fraud. Trump inflated property values to get loans he shouldn't have qualified for. He deflated values to pay lower taxes. He played the system for years, and Letitia James caught him. But here's what makes her dangerous to Trump. She's not done. The civil case is over, but there are still potential criminal charges. There are still investigations happening. And as Attorney General of New York, she has the power to keep digging. That's why Trump tried to get her indicted. That's why the administration pushed prosecutors to find something, anything to charge her with. Because if you can't beat the investigator, you try to destroy them. Point 3. The attempts to retaliate against James have failed so far. This is important. Despite all the pressure, despite U.S. attorneys being fired for refusing to pursue bogus charges, despite the DOJ scrutiny, Letitia James hasn't been charged with anything. Why? Because there's no evidence. The mortgage fraud claim fell apart immediately. Multiple attorneys looked into it and said there's nothing here, and that tells you something. It tells you this was never about finding real crimes. It was about intimidation. It was about sending a message. If you come after me, I'll come after you. But it didn't work, at least not yet. Point 4. This is bigger than Trump, Smith, and James. Here's the part that everyone needs to understand. This story isn't just about 3 people in a legal battle. This is about whether American institutions can survive when someone tries to weaponize them. The Department of Justice is supposed to be independent. It's supposed to investigate crimes based on evidence, not based on who the president likes or doesn't like. But what we're seeing right now is an attempt to turn the DOJ into a political weapon. Investigate my enemies, protect my allies, ignore the evidence if it hurts me. And if that becomes the norm, if future presidents see what Trump is doing and think, yeah, I can do that too, then we're in serious trouble. Because the rule of law only works if it applies to everyone. Rich, poor, powerful, powerless. Doesn't matter. The law is supposed to be the law. But when the most powerful person in the country can make their legal problems disappear just by winning an election, when prosecutors get fired for refusing to pursue political hit jobs, when investigators get investigated just for doing their job, that's not the rule of law. That's something else entirely. So let's talk about what comes next. Because this story isn't over, not even close. Jack Smith's cases might be dormant right now, but all that evidence still exists. The reports he filed, public record. If Trump leaves office in 2029 and there's still time on the statute of limitations, those cases could come back. Letitia James, still the Attorney General of New York, still investigating, still holding that $350 million judgment, and Trump still has to deal with her. So the question becomes, what does Trump do? Does he keep trying to pressure prosecutors? Does he keep trying to get James indicted on made-up charges? Does he try to change laws to protect himself after he leaves office? Or does he just hope that by the time 2029 rolls around, everyone's forgotten? Here's what legal experts are watching. They're watching to see if anyone else in the DOJ refuses to play ball. They're watching to see if more U.S. attorneys get fired for not pursuing political cases. They're watching to see if other state attorneys general start getting investigated just for doing their jobs. Because if this becomes a pattern, if this becomes normal, then we've crossed a line we can't uncross. And yeah, I know this is heavy. I know this is a lot, but it matters. It matters because Jack Smith and Letitia James represent something bigger than themselves. They represent the idea that no one is above the law. They represent the idea that if you commit crimes, even if you're rich, even if you're powerful, even if you're president, there should be consequences. Trump fears them because they refuse to back down, because they have evidence, because they built cases that could actually hold up in court. And as long as they're still standing, as long as those cases are still out there, Trump can't fully escape. So here's the bottom line. This isn't just another legal story. This isn't just more Trump drama. This is a test of whether our institutions can hold, a test of whether the rule of law still means something. And right now, the outcome is still up in the air. Jack Smith is gone, but his work remains. Letitia James is still fighting, and Trump, he's still scared because deep down, he knows what they know. The truth doesn't just go away because you will it to, and that more than anything else is what keeps him up at night.